My speech for today is on the Civil War, the beginning, the main battles in the war, and the resolution of the Civil War. My goal for the speech is to inform each of you today all about the Civil War, how it began, and what happened during it, and how it ended, so that way you can tell others about this as well. So I'll start with the Civil War's beginnings. So it started off with the Stephen Lincoln Douglas debates. So Abraham Lincoln, almost everyone knows who he is. He was a Republican senator who was running for president of the United States against Stephen Douglas, who was a Democrat. The Democrats back then were mostly like the South, who supported slavery and states' rights, whereas the Republicans supported more of like non-slavery as new states were admitted to the country. So the Stephen Lincoln debates were extremely important because Stephen Douglas ended up dividing the Democrats in half, because Abraham Lincoln asked him a question regarding what happens for new states admitting into the Union. So Stephen Douglas had the theory of popular sovereignty, whereas the more people that support a region, then the more likely it is to become that. So if there's more slave owners in there, they would vote for slavery, so it would become a slave state. Or if there's non-slave owners in there and they voted for no slavery, it would be no slavery. This broke the Democrats in half because half were very angry slaveholders who wanted all slave states, and the other half did not care so much, and they just didn't want to deal with the war like there was in Nebraska, Kansas. So this led to the beginnings, and then after Abraham Lincoln won the presidency, the South got very upset, and it started with the second part of this, which was Fort Sumter. So North Carolina decided to secede first from the Union, or South Carolina, my apologies, decided to secede first from the Union, and the first shots were fired at Fort Sumter. So this showed how serious the war was as they took over the fort, and Lincoln decided to send an army to fight back and take this over. Along with South Carolina, after this, a couple other states did, until eventually the rest of them all joined together to form the Confederacy. So the Confederacy split the complete United States at the time in half, and it was the North versus the South. There's many major wars between the two, but the biggest, in my opinion, the most influential in the whole victory of the war was called Sherman's March. So Sherman's March was, as it applies, a march all the way from the north to the south. They followed the Mississippi River down along the south, and a quote was, "Sherman's men destroyed tunnels, bridges, expending particular effort to make railroad tracks unusable." That was by the scorched earth article at the time. So basically, what his group did was they would destroy the farmland, they would take all the food and just burn it to the ground. If they found railroads, they would completely destroy the railroads, because at the time, the South was very unindustrialized. They were focusing on cotton and farming. So what little railroad tracks they had, it was more of kind of like a straight line just connected to the north. So for Sherman's men to completely destroy the railroad tracks, it made it very hard for the South troops to move. At the time, there was no cars, there was only horse. So if there's no farms, no railroad tracks, no buildings between this destination and there, more than likely you might have to carry more, you might starve along the way. So this completely broke up the South. As he went down all the way in half, it made two sections of the South. This allowed Lincoln's army to send one here, while Sherman continued this way. This was one of the major reasons, in my opinion, for why the Civil War ended up ending, and a lot of historians also agree. So the Confederate troops, when targeted by this, decided to try to circle around back to their capital, and Sherman's March were able to cut them off along with Lincoln's army, and were able to completely annihilate them, trap them in, and force them to surrender. So those are two of the major wars or battles that happened during the Civil War that led to the end of it. And the end afterwards was the South surrendered, obviously, and the treaty was made. The North ended up winning, and they started to try to readmit the states into the Union. The only problem was, this was called reconstructing the nation. But the problem is that a lot of the people of the United States had different opinions on how to reincorporate the people. For instance, a lot of the South just kind of wanted to get back in and get back into life, except for the slave owners. While the North wanted repercussions, especially those in the higher government wanted repercussions for the major leaders because they had violated the Constitution, as they had said. So because of this, Lincoln attempted to slowly bring them in, pardoning most of the people, but not the high leaders. The Emancipation Proclamation was also created that, as it says, the laws and Constitution were rewritten to guarantee African Americans recognition as citizens and equality before the law. In order to rejoin the Union, the South State must accept this and all laws of the Union in order to come back in. So unfortunately, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, but his Vice President Andrew Johnson took over. The problem was Andrew Johnson and the Congress fought very often between their ideas, with Andrew Johnson kind of taking a stricter stance while also being less harsh on the slave owners, whereas Congress wanted to get them in and get the United States back together and working. So this led to a lot of conflict and made Reconstruction last a lot longer. So that's all I have to say today about the Civil War, the beginning, the major battles and wars, and the Reconstruction itself. Hope you all have something that you've learned today, and you're able to take it with you and teach everyone else. Thank you.